All right. Stop complaining all the time so that you will not become a persona non grata. Keeping company with complainers is very unpleasant. They find fault with everything, and they want the world to resolve around them in conformance with their way of seeing things. Since you cannot change others, you must work tirelessly on your own self-improvement. If everything displeases you and you find yourself complaining all the time, watch out. It is an attitude of someone who is out of sorts with life and him or herself. You must tolerate yourself and learn to be tolerant of others.
Thank you, Christian. Okay, so small opening prayer. I'm gonna do the music to help us. Yeah, music is always good. All right, so let's take a deep breath. Relax and allow us to have a moment with ourselves, with the higher spirits, who is our divine creator. Thank you, Father, for all that has been given to us. Thank you for this moment. Allow us to be present so that we can enjoy, take advantage of these few minutes that we go inside. Like the message, inspire us. Go inside so that we can work in our inner transformation. So help us, once again, to have an open heart, an open mind, and listen to our speaker today. Inspire us throughout this week. And above all, may your will be done, not ours. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Susanna. That was a very good message and prayer, of course. Stop complaining. Who does not complain? Yeah. So it's hard to say, right? And many times I don't think we realize how much we're complaining because we don't think. So I would say that's a call for us to be present and watch when we've been complaining, because the energy that comes with it is not very good. Like Jonah De Angelis was saying, the companies that we bring towards us, they're not good. And so, yeah. And so today I want to talk about renunciation, and I think that's one big one. To renounce of not complaining. Yeah, I think that's one step that we can think about it. And so we kind of renunciation besides complaining. Do you think that we should work on ourselves? Again, that's about inner transformation, and it's always about ourselves. It's not about others, as the message was saying. It's about changing ourselves. And to change ourselves, we need to renounce ourselves. So what does that mean? Like, I'm going to renounce myself? That means to renounce our earthly passions. So what is an earthly passion? It's everything that makes us feel really good, in a sense that is not true happiness. And it's just many times at that moment make us feel good. But in the long term, it's just not good for us. And many times we think that's make us feeling good, but it's not really. It's like drugs, for example. Give like a very easy example, right? When you take drugs or drink alcohol or any type of substance that make us numb our mind, right? Some people do with TV. If you don't use, okay, I don't use any drugs. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do alcohol. But TV, gossiping, complaining, those are all vices. What kind of vices that? Our own personality vices. That goes with the what? Goes with what we've been talking about, and I'm sure everybody heard this word, ego. So what is the ego? To simplify, ego means our own personality. In a sense that is not our true self, our connection with God and Jesus, but is our earthly personality. So everything that's related to material life, everything that's related to earthly life, that we're not taking with us when we discarnate. Because when we discarnate, we just take our spirit. So everything that makes us feel here on earth, that's related to our ego. So passions, right? Things that make us feel good, but not really, is like illusion. Jonas Angelis talks a lot about that, illusion. So it's like a drug, it's an illusion in a sense that I'm sure if you never take any kind of drugs, never be drunk in your entire life, if you ask anyone who did that before, it say it felt really good. I was happy, I was having a good time, everything looked perfect. I don't know, there's a friend of mine said that if you heard about the phrase that people say, oh, I love you, man. You know, when you're drunk and you love everybody, that's great, right? At that moment, for a few hours maybe, but after that, when you wake up, most of the people feel depressed after, drinking or using alcohol, any type of substance. Why? Because you got like in a peak, you're very happy, and then when we come back, because our true self is not that. We're not going to be drunk when we discarnate, right? We're not going to be using any type of drugs to make us feel happy. So how can we be happy then? What is true happiness? The true feeling of true joy. And that's the only thing that can make us happy. And that's what Jesus told us more than 2,000 years ago, is love. Okay, that's very easy to say love. So what is love? Bernadette had a beautiful talk last week. If you guys did not hear, I recommend you go back to our YouTube channel and listen to it again. Love and action. What is love and action? Love is a verb. I'm talking about the love as a verb. So actions. First of all, doing good towards anybody, anyone. Being here today is doing good. That's the first step. That's an action. Because I'm sure many of us have many struggles to be here. Because it's much easier to be in bed. We're having a very cool day in San Diego, like cool weather. That's not very common, so it's It's so good to stay under the covers, right? And maybe watch some TV, have breakfast in bed. So take us some action to be here. And we are here. It takes us action to be able to learn something. It takes us action to open up our ears and listen to it. Okay, so what kind of good am I doing right now? I'm doing good to myself. And when I do good to myself, I do good to others. Because there is no way, if I'm doing good, not spreading goodness. That's part of God's law. The opposite's true also. If I'm doing something bad, I'm spreading not goodness or bad. So when we do good towards ourselves, when we do acts of love towards ourselves, and today we are learning, we are sharing, we are socializing, we're talking about that, how good it is for our own health to socialize with others, because God made us creatures of social beings. So we need to socialize. Spread goodness, right? Friendship. This exchanging of energy that we're doing with goodness, it's good for everybody. So that's act of love, starting with ourselves and spreading towards others. So we had to renounce our own laziness, right? Our comfort zone to be here today. So that's the first step. And we need to do these little renunciations every day, every moment. And the big one that I want to elaborate a little bit is renounce. We talk about ego, but the main thing that what makes our ego, it's our own selfishness. And from our selfishness comes pride. So the big one to renounce, to become better, to do our inner transformation, is to renounce our pride. And going with that, I want to talk about a little passage from the Gospel when Jesus told us, if someone strikes you your right cheek, offer him the other also. So this phrase by Jesus means renunciation of our pride. That's what he did, right? He showed us the example. He renounced himself to be on earth. He renounced his place in the universe full of light and came here to this planet full of darkness to help us to understand that there is a better way of living. And another thing that Bernadette talked about last week, it's like it's much better to be happy than to be right. And we forget that because we want to be right all the time. Does that make us happy? Maybe we have a sensation, our ego grows when we feel, okay, I'm right. And then it makes the other person feel diminished. But is that true happiness? No. That's just to make our ego happy for a brief second. And after that, what happens? We're not happy anymore, and then we have to find another way of being happy. Another way, and that's when we make our ego stronger. And that's when we grow our pride. And that's not good for us, because that's temporary. And we're looking at our eternal life. We're not looking at this life here on earth, because that's very short. If we think how much we are here comparing our eternal life, I know it's hard to grasp that idea. But if we think the examples that we read in many books, the Spirit brings to us many good examples by Andrea Lewis, even by John Evangelist. We spend much more time in the spiritual realm than on earth. Because we go there for so many years, and then we learn. First of all, we are rebellious and suffering. Then we decided to learn. So we take him to some place. Just give you like a broader perspective. That it's not everybody equal, but some examples that we read about it. Okay, so we feel miserable. Let's talk about Andrea Luiz. Okay, that most of us have read any of his books. The most famous one, the first one, it calls Nosso Lar, or Our Home, right? And then it shows his life. He was a doctor, a physician, incarnated, and then he died, and he had no religions. I mean, he was raised in a religion, but he did not really follow that. And then he discarnated early because of his passions, and his passion was drinking and eating good food, or which means having a good time or enjoying life. That was his passions. He was a good doctor and he was a good man, but that was his weaknesses, which led him to colon cancer, and he died by colon cancer. So when he was in this spiritual realm, he woke up in a very bad shape. And he was called suicidal. He was like, I did not suicide myself. What are you talking about? And it took him many years suffering to realize that he was a suicidal, because he was not aware of any spiritual side of his life. He was just enjoying life, having a good time, very like earthly passions. And that's why he died early. So this is we call indirect suicide. If you never heard about it, that's what we learned reading not only this book, but many other ones who talks about that, indirect suicide. So after, they say about 9 years, he was in this miserable place, suffering. He finally woke up from this suffering and complaining and all sorts of miseries. And then he asked for help. That's when he called God and Jesus, that he was helped. And then he was took to a much better place. And then he started his whole journey out there in the spiritual realm. Studying, learning, working, develop his moral virtues like humbleness and kindness and many others. And that's when he started writing those books with the help of Chico Xavier as a medium. And if I'm not mistaken, it was about 12 books that they wrote together, or maybe more. So it was many, many years, and I don't know, we don't really have any news from if he's incarnated now or not. But he's been spending so many years in the other side. So if you compare, the experience that we have here and the experience that we're going to have or we had on the other side is our true home. That's what we call our true home. And Jesus told us, I'm not of this world. And we're not of this world either, because you're immortal spirits and we are God's creatures. And we're Jesus' brothers and sisters. So that's our future. And so going back to renounce our pride, and what here the spirits talk about in this particular, that's chapter 12, if anybody wants to go back and read. Chapter 12 and item 8, they talk about exaltation of personality when someone, and that's really hard for us, I know, when someone do something against us. And so how do we react? Normally we want to revenge, right? If someone hurt us, we want to hurt this person. Why? Because you want the other person to feel as bad as we felt. But that's not what Jesus taught us. He taught us to repay back injury with goodness, not injury for injury, not offense for offense. That's part of our ego. Why? Because our pride tells us, or our ego tells us, you're not going to answer back. We're going to allow this person to hurt you. You're not going to do anything back. So we play God, right? Basically, that's all we do. We want to revenge. We want to be the justice makers. So we want to take Jesus' job and say, I'm going to do justice. So if this person did that to me, I'm going to make this person suffer. And at the end of the day, are we happy doing that? That's the thing. And going back to what we learned from Saint Francis of Assisi, it's giving the receive. And Buddhism says the same thing, and many other doctrines. We receive what we give. So if someone offends us and we repay with offense, we're going to receive back. So it's like endless. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like it never stops. And that's why we're here suffering, because we've been doing that for so many reincarnations, so many other lives. We're doing the same thing. Why? Because we did not know better. But for all of us who are here today, we know better. It's not going to bring us happiness. And that's not our job, because we're not God. And that's an act of faith. If we believe in God, if we believe in God's justice, and I like to bring Jesus to us, because I think it's more like a figure that we can grasp, right? Jesus, he was here with us on earth. It's not what Jesus told us to do. And I believe in Jesus, and I believe all of us believe in Jesus, that he knows better than we do, right? So that's an act of trust. Trust in Jesus. He's saying the truth. So let's try to do different. Let's try to, instead of, okay, our ego is going to tell us, right? Susanna comes like, our ego, at the same time, is going to be like, the flight and fight thing that we have, that were animal instincts. Right? Wake up is like, and then that's the thing. Our choice is what we're going to do with that now. The feelings are going to come. The emotions are going to come. But our reaction, that's our choice. That's when comes our own rationalization. We need to use our rational part of the brain and say, don't revenge or don't repay with offense. That's not the way. So we stop right there, because that's the only way to stop violence. If you want to stop the war in our road, stop having violence in our homes, any type of violence, discussions, violence in our jobs, in our home, during traffic, is to stop, because it's like, if you don't respond, it's right, it stops right there. The energy stops right there. So nobody fights against each other. I mean, to yourselves, right? We don't fight alone. We need someone else. If we don't, like if someone, and that's what they call before, right? There was the duel 200 years ago or something, right? Well, actually, it still happens. So if people calls you, okay, let's have a fight, it's our choice to go or not. So that's what Jesus is telling us here. Don't fight back. That's not the way. Forgive is the way. And forgive is one part of love. Forgiveness is one part of love in action. So action of forgiveness is part of love. So forgive, understanding is another action of love. Trying to see the other person is hurt. Because we're not meant to be violent. We're not meant to offend other people. We're not meant to. When we do that, because we're much more hurt than we want to hurt the other person. So we feel hurt and you want to make the other person feeling miserable. That's what we do. So the first step starts inside ourselves. Pride. Our ego. Tell our ego, that's okay. I don't need to fight back. That's fine. I don't want to feel bad. Because we feel bad, right? I don't believe anybody who fights, who argues or offends feels good. That's impossible. Because that's not, the energy, that's not the energy of love. We just feel happy when we feel the energy of love, when you're making other people happy, when you're with our friends and laughing and doing good. That's when you feel happy. When you do charity, right? Many of us here have done charity in some source, helping the homeless, helping children, educating children. We feel happiness inside because that's true happiness. That's when we do good. And that's what Jesus is telling us right here. So repay evil with goodness. That's what Jesus tells us. And in here at the end, it's so beautiful what he says that here, only faith in the future life and God's justice, which never leaves injustice unpunished, can provide the strength to bear patiently the blows directed against our interests and self-centeredness. Which means we have to have faith in God, to believe that God would never leave injustice unpunished. And that's God's job, it's not ours. And just to end, they tell us, focus your gaze on the future ahead. The more you lift yourselves above the material life through thought, the less you will be disheartened by things of the earth. What does that mean? The more we live in he talks about thought, because everything starts in our thoughts. Let's, for instance, think about thought of revenge, right? So we have to lift our thoughts about earth. He says here, things of the earth. That's again our passions. So let's try to practice love with forgiveness, patience, and find different ways of act and not react, because we're gonna get offended. There is no way that we're not gonna get hurt or offended, or actually to get offended, it's our own choice. So I would say the first step is not to get offended, not to get hurt, and give it back. You know, when someone gives us a present that you don't like, you give it back. It's like, oh, I don't like, take it back. No, you can hold it but put it away. You don't need to tell the person that I'm putting it away, but just don't take the present. So don't take the evil that people, the life will give to us. Just live it. It's not our job to do justice. That's God's job. That's why He sent Jesus to help us. Thank you. So be it.